House of Gucci's hitting theaters this weekend, but guys, I gotta say, after watching the trailers and the movie, there's one person in the world that I think has a better Italian accent than anyone in this film.
It's me, Mario!
What's going on, everyone? James here with another real review, and today I'm so excited to finally dive into House of Gucci. Thank you a ton to MGM for giving me the chance to go ahead and watch this film early for review. I did see it in theaters, and guys, it's a long one, so you better strap in. It is just shy of 3 hours long. It's like 2 hours and 40 something minutes. Yeah. Now, the movie is directed by Ridley Scott, a legend in the industry, and it's starring Lady Gaga, Adam Driver, Al Pacino, and Jared Leto. Now, the film itself is based on the true story of Patrizia Reggiani, who she killed, or at least conspired to kill, her husband Maurizio Gucci. And this movie covers a long period of time, almost decades I would say, of love, betrayal, and all that revenge bottled into one film. So the movie is covering a lot of time here, even though the characters don't really age, but we'll get into that as we get into my review. So before we get started, guys, if it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where I love reviewing movies like this all the time, so you're not going to want to miss out. Go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, tap on that bell, and go ahead and hit that thumbs up button, and get loud down below in the comments and let me know what you think of this movie when you see it this weekend. It hits theaters Thanksgiving weekend, so it's going to make a lot of money, but whether or not it's good or if it's not so great is another question. It's another topic that we'll address. So let's go ahead and not be negative. Let's start off with what I enjoyed when it comes to House of Gucci. And the one thing that really jumps off the page for me is the costume design in this film. Janty Yates has been around for a very long time in this industry, but she's also worked on Gladiator, The Martian, so she's been with Ridley Scott for some years now. Janty Yates just puts together an incredible amount of outfits that range from very eclectic to very subtle and reserved, but everything looked beautiful, and this was probably the most authentic part of the movie. And of course, everyone's going to be raving about the performances in this movie, but the two best performances I think really come from Adam Driver and Al Pacino. Their accents aren't as bad, and I do think that Al Pacino gives the most layered and emotionally grounded performance of the movie. There's this one scene with Jared Leto where his acting just is on full display. I mean, it's some of the best acting I've seen from him in a little while now. When it comes to Adam Driver, the man is just, he's versatile. He's got such incredible range, and I love the kind of nuanced ability that he brings to the table, where he's kind of reserved in moments where he's acting more so without being over the top. And I think the fact that he's able to really command the screen alongside some other pretty good actors in this movie is a testament to his ability and how he's grown over the years. And of course, even though it is a true story and we know what happens here, guys, I think the narrative in House of Gucci was pretty interesting. I had already known what happened between Maurizio Gucci and Patrizia, but there are some elements that I wasn't familiar with, and it just made for a pretty entertaining story. I won't tell you that all of it worked, but for the most part, the narrative actually wasn't the worst thing about the film. There are definitely lots of twists and turns, especially if you're not all the way familiar with the true story, so I think most audiences will come away kind of learning something they didn't know heading into the film. And the one thing you'll probably hear the most, guys, is that this movie is campy, and I can confirm the film is definitely campy in its approach. Sometimes it goes over the top with Jared Leto, who we'll talk about soon, and sometimes it is just, I don't know, it's not supposed to be funny, but it is funny in some moments because of the music, the soundtrack that they use, but also just the way the movie is shot and directed. So campy works sometimes in this movie, and you know, that's just what it is. So I wouldn't actually take this movie too seriously, you guys, and you might actually enjoy it even more. But you guys, for me, that's where the positives stop, because I can't tell you that I'm a fan of House of Gucci. Heading into this film after seeing one trailer, my biggest concerns were the accents. Guys, I just was not sold on any of the Italian accents, whether it be from Adam Driver or even from Lady Gaga. It just never worked for me. And in the final product, unfortunately, in the context of it all, the accents were probably the most inconsistent thing about this movie. Lady Gaga's accent never worked for me. It sounded way more Russian than Italian. And even Jeremy Irons' accent, I love him as an actor, but it was the worst of them all. It was half British and half trying to be Italian. And don't get me started on Jared Leto, because we will talk about Jared Leto. It's just not working for me at all. And that's the thing. You would think in a film that has such an all-star cast like this, maybe you'd want to try and go the more authentic route. So I don't know. Maybe at the end of the day, you should have just hired a ton of Italian actors, but I do think that this, for me, is just where the movie struggles to find its footing in terms of authenticity, because for as good as the costumes looked, it lacked an authenticity everywhere else. Now, when it comes to the rest of the performances, I know I just raved about Adam Driver and Al Pacino a little bit, but I gotta tell you, I'm conflicted. And the reason I'm conflicted is because Lady Gaga, in terms of acting, performance, and ability, she's good, and I know she can deliver an A+ performance. Look at A Star Is Born, and I think she has the chops to really make it as an actor. And we know she can sing, guys. That's without question one of the best singers of our generation, but I just don't really buy her as Patricia in this movie. And it really is the accent, you guys. It just doesn't work for me, and for all the immersion that the film tries to earn in that first act, it takes me out of the rest of the film. You can tell that she is trying to put the accent on, and it just doesn't work. It has to go further than just dramatic yelling and shouting. You need to actually nail the Italian accent, and for me it sounded much more Russian, especially when you put her alongside an Al Pacino or even some of the other actors who have supporting roles but are putting on a pretty decent Italian accent. But again, her acting isn't bad in this movie, but for the role, for what the movie's trying to accomplish, maybe it was a little bit of a misstep. And y'all, I know I said I was going to get into Jared Leto, so let's talk about his performance now. He was awful. And here's the thing, Jared Leto, yes, delivered a really good performance in Dallas Buyers Club, and it was worthy of that Oscar, but since then, I feel like he's never found a performance that I can say I really vibe with. And in House of Gucci, he plays Paolo Gucci, one of the sons of Aldo, and he's a big part of the storyline. I mean, there's something that happens, and it's major in that second half, that should have really resonated with me, but it didn't, and it's due in large part to Jared Leto just not really getting it. He actually sounds like he's making a mockery of the Italian accent, or of Italians in general. None of this is accurate. Yes, do some Italians have eccentric mannerisms about them? Absolutely. But he sounds like someone who is trying to make fun of an Italian accent. And it just, one, it offended me a little bit, but two, it just never worked. So when the film tries to get uber serious with him and he's sitting out there shouting at Adam Driver and Lady Gaga, I mean, I couldn't help but just chuckle to myself and think, is this actually happening? And even outside of the acting, you guys, I have to say the overall movie itself, I think, suffers from a couple technical issues and story issues, and one of them being that the movie is paced really poorly. This film felt like 2 hours and 37 minutes. It never to me felt like it was streamlined, and honestly, I kind of felt the momentum wearing off towards the end. There's this popcorn effect where in the beginning I actually was pretty locked in, and then eventually it kind of goes away, but I figured, okay, that's natural. It skyrockets and then it comes down again, but there's too much of that back and forth for the film to feel consistent like it should have been. And the editing does not help here either, you guys, because it's very choppy and these time jumps felt completely unnatural. There are just so many moments in this movie and instances where I thought to myself, how does this make sense in terms of the time? Like, what reference do we have here? Lady Gaga gives birth and then literally in the next scene she's on a flight to go visit her father-in-law? Like, make that make sense for me, but unfortunately I just don't think the editing helps here. And then there are these weird needle drops at times where you're into the moment, the music is building and helping the scene, and then it cuts away super quick and we're in a totally different frame of time, and I'm like, all right, something needs to be at least consistent in this regard, but nothing got there for me. And honestly, once those end credits ran, I thought to myself, guys, this movie's just trying to do too much. It's entirely bloated, especially in that final stretch where they introduce much more of Salma Hayek's character. She's this tarot card reader who essentially helps Patricia in getting what she wants. But, you know, I'll leave it at that in case you're not too familiar with the true story. I will tell you though, her subplot was really shoehorned into the final act, and it felt like to me it detracted from what was working, which is that drama, the tension between Lady Gaga and Adam Driver's characters. Instead, we get a heavy dose of this subplot. So it's just these creative decisions that just didn't really pay off. I mean, they're big swings, but they're also big misses for me. And I honestly was completely surprised that I wasn't resonating with the story at all, because for as much flair as the movie has, the story itself was really dull. It's just uninteresting to me with the way that it was presented. You had me in the first act, and then you lost me in the second and third, because none of what this movie does in that later half ever really gets there for me. It's just a lot of what could have been instead of what actually happened, and then we get just some of these very weird moments of time where I feel like, do we need to be honing in on this conversation for so long between Maurizio and these other investors? Like, I just think that the movie spends a lot of time in certain places where it doesn't need to, and the rest of the film suffers. So overall, you guys, House of Gucci is a very ambitious film by director Ridley Scott. He tries his hardest to make this story feel like something we've never heard or seen before, but to me, House of Gucci falls way short of the mark. This is a film with an amazing cast. I mean, come on, Lady Gaga, Adam Driver, Al Pacino, goodness gracious. But all of this talent in one room never really equated to an excellent film. And quite frankly, I never connected with the story at all. None of the characters were relatable outside of maybe Adam Driver's character, but I do think that the film suffers from authenticity. That's it. At the end of the day, if you're gonna make a movie about Gucci and the Gucci family, you need to get the accents, you need to get everything outside of just the costumes and locations correct, and it never worked for me. None of the accents were accurate, and I do think Jared Leto's bombastic performance, where he's kind of going crazy and just really making it sound like he's mocking Italians, it quite frankly turned me off from the rest of the film from that point on. Even though I never was really 100% sold on House of Gucci, I went in with an open mind, hoping to come away enjoying this experience. But unfortunately, nothing about House of Gucci is appealing, and I don't think it's one of the stronger films of the year. And it's a shame too, because this true story has a lot of potential to work in this huge, epic format, but it just never worked there. It never got there, and I'm sorry, but it's just a rare miss for Ridley Scott. So there you have it, you guys. That's my real review of House of Gucci. But hey, when you watch it this weekend, let me know what you think down below in the comments. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Or are you kind of in the middle? And if you haven't already, hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, tap on that bell, and hit the thumbs up button if you did enjoy this review and are excited for the rest of the year. We got so much, man. We're talking about a ton of Hawkeye. We're talking about, oh my gosh, so many end of the year awards considerations, and of course we're getting to award season, so you can expect some coverage of that on the channel as well. Alrighty, you guys, again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening. And I'm about to go call my family in Italy. I'm gonna ask them how they feel about this film.